Welcome to EnVision Center News, where we discuss community impact and involvement with today's nonprofit leaders and philanthropists.
Kristin, hello and welcome to the podcast. Very excited to talk about the work that you do. This is one of my favorite nonprofits around. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about your past, kind of your shortened autobiography.
Well, thanks for having us. My name is Kristin Linville Ludwig. I am the Director of Development at CASA, which is North Idaho CASA. Nonprofit work has always been a calling, even though at the beginning of my career, I went to college for journalism and was in the advertising agency world in the Midwest. I worked for big corporations, McDonald's, Eli Lilly, and thought, wow, I'm not hugely making a difference. I'm actually kind of contributing to the big machine. So got married, moved out west, had some kids, and then got involved in community work. So I was the soccer mom, the PTA person, and really got a sense of the community and how involved I wanted to be in raising my children and in the environment that they were in. And I literally kind of walked into this nonprofit work. I had volunteered for an organization, Idaho Youth Ranch, for years in Coeur d'Alene. And then my girlfriend and I were walking, and she was like, oh, the marketing person's leaving CASA. And my boys were in middle school. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to get back into it. And planning events, raising money, talking to people about the cause, getting people to rally behind different things. It just came natural to me. And so I got that position and I haven't looked back. And that was 8 years ago.
Wow. So your position has changed.
Yes.
You're not in the same position. So how quickly did you know, I'm going to be here for a while?
I think when you join an organization and you can not only see the potential, but understand how that work can evolve into different things. So at first I was just raising money, and we were literally rubbing pennies together to pay just the couple people that were on staff, because we're a volunteer organization, and we can get into that, in a few minutes. But then it became, well, let's write grants. And if we have that money coming in, how my job as far as just getting the checks to pay the bills can turn into more of a development and community partnerships. And really, you can make it as big as you want it to be. So that was kind of I'm a dedicated person. I'm a pretty loyal person. So when I saw that potential, I thought this probably isn't going to be short-lived.
What did you know about the organization before you joined?
I honestly didn't know much. I knew a couple of the ladies that worked there. My girlfriend was an advocate, so she was a volunteer. And I didn't really even understand how nonprofits worked, because if you're a nonprofit and you're not profiting anything, are the people getting paid, or are they just volunteers? So once I got into it and understood the mechanics as to what CASA is and how vital the advocate's role is in child protection, then I got a sense of, unfortunately, child abuse is probably never going to go away. So we always say, hey, we wish we weren't here.
Yeah.
But knowing that it was a source of something that was more than likely not going to dissipate, it just made my dedication even stronger, and my will to get more people involved and really to shine a light on what advocacy is, because nobody wants to talk about child abuse and neglect. And it's happening in your own backyard. And it's a hard subject. It's really a hard subject to bring up. Nobody wants the Debbie Downer at the cocktail party. So, oh God, you should hear about this abuse case we have. But we believe that the more people and the more community members understand what's happening, it is really all of our responsibility to have eyes on our kids. And they depend on us because a lot of them are suffering in silence. And we really do need to report that suspicion of abuse and neglect and let law enforcement do what they do best and investigate that work. So it is really a community responsibility.
So for those who may not know, what is CASA? What's kind of your elevator pitch, or when you meet someone and they're like, "What do you do?" and you're like, "I work at CASA." What is that?
It's not a house.
Yeah, yeah.
So CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate, and that means that we are court appointed. So a judge has to appoint an advocate to a case. And what that means is most kids that are brought into the child protection system are rescued from their homes from law enforcement based on a call or a community member or a teacher calling about a welfare check. And when the situation is so bad, that is when the child is removed from the home and then usually stays with kin or placed in foster care. Mm-hmm. So most of our cases then go through an initial hearing in which a judge will assign a CASA, because mom and dad usually have a lawyer, but nobody is representing the child. And the child at that point is under the care of the Department of Health and Welfare, but they don't have the manpower to really do an investigative work and really advocate for the child. Most of our kiddos are 5 and under, so they can't really sit down and talk about their trauma or talk about what they want or where they want to be. So the investigative work of a third-party person is super important because it's not really biased in any way. They're really looking out for the best interest of the child. And our first judicial district CASA started in 1993. So we just got done a couple years ago celebrating 30 years of advocacy, which is huge. It's a long-standing program.
So there are CASAs all over the country?
There are. So you might hear the term guardian ad litem or GAL and CASA. So a guardian ad litem is this in the same sense, assigned through court to represent that child. And it depends from state to state. So, for example, in Washington State, they are a fully funded program. So their CASAs and GALs are a state-funded program. We here in Idaho are not. So we have to write grants, get the donations. They need a person like me. Like I wouldn't exist in a CASA or GAL organization in the state because they just have some supervisors and they still are a volunteer organization, but they don't necessarily meet the needs of every single case like we're able to do.
So even though they're state funded, you do more. Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And we are equipped, especially here in the First Judicial District. We are going to own a building in Coeur d'Alene. We rent a building up here in Sandpoint. We're equipped to, if it would become a state-run organization, that we would still be an entity that would function like we function because we do have the relationship with the stakeholders and the judges and the lawyers and law enforcement and that community partnership to be able to represent every case.
Okay. And so just like you said, just to clarify, every case you don't have to turn it down because there's just too many cases and not enough advocates?
Correct. So, for example, in Seattle, King County, they only serve 35% of their cases. So there are so many kids that don't have representation. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be put in a proper safe home. But statistically, kids that have advocates are more successful in school, they're more confident, they're more apt to get over their trauma because as soon as they realize that a person that loves and cares for them shouldn't treat them like this. Like they are a victim. And the sooner they realize that, they can really work on their trauma and the healing can begin. So we have found that the earlier we're involved in cases, the better outcome for these children.
And so the advocate does their own sort of investigation, right? But then they're also they become a friend to the kid that they're advocating for. Like, what does that relationship look like?
Well, and it can look like anything. So if there is a child that's brought in as an infant and their case closes in a year, that child might never know who their advocate was. But the elementary age kids and especially the teenagers, because we all know how that can be a trying time anyway. So the development of having a relationship with an adult that is there for you because they want to be there. So a lot of our teens really love the relationship they have with their advocates because they're showing up. They're volunteering to show up. They're not a caseworker. They're not showing up just because they have to. These people really love and care and have their best interests in heart and are there to be a support system where a lot of these kids haven't had an adult that is a positive support for them in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that it's a volunteer is really powerful because, a parent, we all know that. I think most of us would agree, like morally, a parent is supposed to show up for their kid. But a lot of parents don't because it sort of is voluntary also. You can just give your kid up. You can walk away. It's not illegal to do so. It's illegal to abuse your child, but it's not illegal to say, oh, well, and the state's coming.
Yep.
I'd rather go party and do whatever else.
Yeah.
And so it's do you ever have advocates? I know this is kind of a random question, but do you ever have advocates that connect with the kid and the situation is bad and they're like, I'll adopt him?
Well, we do have a lot of advocates that decide to be foster parents or vice versa. There are foster parents that then turn to advocacy because they see the need and the importance in both aspects.
Okay.
There's a ton of foster families that then will adopt.
And what other ways and maybe there aren't any, but are there other ways people can volunteer and help out with CASA if maybe they're like, I don't have the time to be an advocate, or that just feels really heavy.
Really heavy.
And I don't know if I can handle it, or I'm just not really good at that kind of like investigation stuff. Are there other ways people can get involved?
There are. We do have our advocates that specialize in different areas. There are some that really love the investigation portion of it, and that usually happens in the beginning. And then there are a lot of we have a lot of retired people, especially that were school teachers that just want to be like that grandparent role. So we really look at our pool of advocates, and when cases come in, look to see what advocate would match with that case, because we pride ourselves on assigning an advocate that sees that case from start to finish. So especially if it is a child that is an elementary age kid that is going to develop a relationship with this advocate, we want to make sure that that stable adult remains stable throughout their entire case.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so hard when we are recruiting volunteers, when they ask, well, how much is the time commitment? Every case is so different. And the investigative work is a lot because the family tree is crazy big. And others, it's pretty simple. And then an advocate's role is really just to check on the child once a month, physically, like have eyes on them, whether they're going to school or meeting in the home. But a lot of our advocates develop real friendships and relationships with these kids, some of which go into their teenage years, and it's a fantastic thing to see.
What type of person, when you're recruiting volunteers, are there certain personalities or demographics that maybe sometimes you have shortages of? I don't know if you typically have more men or more women or younger people. It sounds like older people, you don't probably have a problem. Maybe you want younger folks to get in there and become advocates too. What type of person are you looking for?
We actually have had a surge of younger people that have an interest in advocacy, which is great. We recruit wherever we can. So there is no specific perfect advocate. We always say that our advocates are ordinary people that do extraordinary things, because you just have to have the heart for it. And some of these cases are not pleasant, and sometimes the outcome is not what the advocate wants, and that's hard. That is hard. So we really try to have this camaraderie with our advocates, because a lot of our cases are are very specific with not being in the public. So they can't really talk about cases, especially some of these cases that have been really bad and almost criminal that have made the news. We have advocates that are on those cases, and they can't just talk to anybody about that. So, but the advocates come together and they can really commiserate on, oh my gosh, these cases and these kids. And so there's a huge support system that we have with our advocates, which is great. I'm not saying that definitely makes it better or worse, but you definitely have the support. And we have an event every year that is an advocate appreciation event, and it's called Advocate Plus One. But they bring their plus one, basically the person that they rely on to, confidentially talk about this stuff. Most of the time, it's their spouse. Right. But they deserve recognition too, because somebody that is an advocate that takes this to heart doesn't keep it to themselves. It affects you. It affects when you go to court. It affects the outcome. It affects even, when they have their visit with their kid or their kiddo. So it's an important network of people. So we always just like to say anybody can do it if you have the heart for it. But we understand how you can cycle out a year or two, because it can be difficult.
Do people tend to do it for a little bit, take a break, come back, take a break?
Yes. So in our Advocate Plus One celebration, we always celebrate advocates that have experienced anniversaries. And we usually celebrate the 5 years of advocacy, which is a huge accomplishment. We have several ladies in St. Mary's that have been advocates for over 25 years.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They're lifers, what we call them, lifers. And so we have anywhere between 10. We just celebrated here in Sandpoint a lady that has been with us for 15 years. So it all depends on their lifestyle and their ability to just to advocate and to stick with it.
Are they usually just doing one case at a time or multiple cases?
Advocates usually can do 1 to 2 cases. So National CASA has a statute that you really just can't have an advocate on a lot of cases because, again, they are volunteers.
Yeah.
So, and it becomes a time commitment thing.
Okay. And then I imagine maybe some of those people that are the experienced ones are the ones that can maybe be like, I can take 2.
They can take 2, and it also depends on the nature of the case.
Sure.
Some cases we have 5 siblings, and because of the foster care situation, those siblings might not be in the same home. So they are going, to Benoit, or they're going down to or up to Bonner. So it really, each case is so individual.
Got it. Okay, so as the director of development, what are some of the projects you've got going? What are you developing right now?
So the latest and greatest is our Educate to Advocate campaign. And what we are doing is like a public service announcement. We're educating the community on advocacy. And basically, like I had said at the beginning, we all as community members and as Idaho citizens have not only the right but the duty to report suspicion of child abuse or neglect. What we have found in our case studies is that when we're doing investigative work, there's a lot of times there are family members or neighbors that are like, oh yeah, I knew something was going on, but I didn't want to get involved, or I didn't want, or there's an aunt that didn't want, her nephew to be mad at her if she called the police. And there's ways that in our Educate to Advocate on our page, on our website, there are non-emergent numbers in all 5 of our northern districts that you can call. And if you choose to be anonymous, you can. You can be anonymous and report that. And the more reporting that happens on the same kid or the same family or the same address, law enforcement's going to have that flagged, and they're going to have eyes on that family and just making sure that those kids are not being abused and neglected.
So it's not even like necessarily if you're the first person to make the call to one of these numbers and say, hey, I just got a bad feeling, something I think is weird happening next door or whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean law enforcement's going to jump in. You don't have to feel like you're the one that stuck the cops on them. But if other people are also calling, then you have the confidence and the comfort of knowing, okay, I wasn't the only one.
But if you're the one that suspects that and they do go and there's a couple of kids in the basement that aren't being fed, you're going to feel pretty good about yourself. Oh my gosh, that could have turned bad real fast. So we always encourage people to call on even the slightest suspicion, because if everything's fine, then everything's fine. There's no harm.
Yeah, I would just imagine that's probably people are just afraid of making the call and then it was fine and then you feel bad. But really, how often does that happen? How often is your gut wrong?
Right. We're all like, and that was funny when we were trying to talk about the campaign and trying to think of a name that might, talk a little bit about what it actually is or to make people curious. It came up like trust your gut. And it's like, okay, well, that's a gut is not a really great word to like make a great campaign, but that's exactly what it is. Trust your gut.
Yeah.
Because how many times do we talk ourselves out of it?
And it does seem like if you just follow, people love the true crime podcasts and all of that stuff, right?
I know.
Every time someone suspected something or knew something weird was happening, every time.
Every time.
They didn't say anything when there's ongoing abuse, or even, I heard something funny going on, like someone screaming, and I just thought I should mind my own business.
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
And there is, again, you don't want to be like looking for something that's not there.
Sure.
And through our training for our volunteers, we talk about what neglect really is, because neglect is the gray area, right? Abuse, it's pretty much like, if someone's hitting or punching or screaming, we all know what abuse looks like. But neglect can look so different in so many ways. And sometimes when it's a lower income situation that we might not be privy to in our own lives, like, is neglect having a child sleep on the floor? Well, if they're being loved and cared for and we're all like, hippies sharing a family bed, that's not neglect because these children are loved. So there is a fine line when it comes to that, or, dirty clothes or being late to school all the time. That might not necessarily mean that they're being neglected. Mom might not have an operating car that is working. So it's definitely some gray area, but that's not for us to decide. It's for law enforcement to get it on the record, to investigate, and then to have eyes on those kids. Because the longer they suffer, the worse off they're going to be.
Do y'all do any like fundraiser events type of thing where people can support?
So part of the development is, for me, that used to be just like fundraising and marketing, but my position has evolved. We have Uncorked, which is our fall fundraiser, which again involves wine, because what great successful fundraiser doesn't. And that's always hard too, right? Because the nature of so much of our abuse and neglect falls under the parents either having alcohol abuse or drug abuse. But we kind of set that aside and have a fundraiser that's live auction, silent auction, dinner, and then we have a speaker that could maybe shine a light into a different aspect of advocacy that some people aren't thinking of. And that's every fall down in Coeur d'Alene. We have our purse party up here in Sandpoint that is well attended from the ladies. It's a fundraiser that's been happening now for over 15 years. And we will put bins around town and everybody can donate their handbags, and then we sell them for just for $5, $10, $15, and it's just a fun way to come together. And so it was purses for a purpose and handbags for CASA. It's had lots of different names, but we do that. And then we also have a golf tournament, because who doesn't love a good golf tournament?
Yeah.
So a lot of my jobs throughout the year are the events, and like we have Idaho Gives is coming up. So that it seems like every month or two there is something that's happening, but that's just on the calendar and is a cycle. And it's the development work, like the Educate to Advocate and different campaigns, that we really kind of have to ebb and flow and see what's happening with the standard of our case numbers and the severity of the cases, and what we can do as a community and as a staff to get people behind, making some changes, because our caseload has substantially reduced, and we know that the population has increased in our area. So a lot of contributing factors have gone to that. So that's why this Educate to Advocate campaign is so important.
Yeah, so the point you're making is not that, people have just gotten less violent towards children. It's that people aren't reporting.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's why
Correct.
That's you taking the pulse of the
and
community.
because of a couple of laws, it's harder for law enforcement to rescue kids from their homes. They have to go through a lot of stipulations as far as getting a warrant and going, and there's a lot that has to happen leading up to that. There's also the Family First Act, which really emphasizes families staying together, and we're all for reunification. Like, if biological mom and dad can curb their drug abuse, get clean, have a really safe environment to raise their kids, we are all for reunification. But sometimes, like we had talked about at the beginning of the podcast, some parents check out, and that's just not in the cards. And reunification's not possible.
So if somebody wants to become an advocate or they're curious about it, what's the first step?
So on our website, our trainer, Kim Banta, will, there's a form, and she'll call and they can have a conversation. Any curiosities that somebody has about a time commitment or what they're actually really getting into, Kim has a really good way of giving some solid examples and really being frank with what this looks like. Because the last thing we want is for somebody to think that they want to do it, get into it, and then be like, oh my gosh, this isn't for me. So we want to make sure that we are as transparent as possible. And like you had asked, what different ways people can be involved, we always have volunteer opportunities through our events, through calling to procure items. Even now with the Educate to Advocate, just going out and talking to different small groups. People underestimate their spheres of influence. So we call that just, your people. It's your people that are in your life, whether it's through work or community or small group or church. And that is a way to spread the word, is just to talk within your spheres. And so I always use this visual of, 9 of us in all of our circles. Just think of how big that population is when we all reach our sphere of influence. So the more spheres we have, the better off we are.
And do you do training at just specific times of the year, or can you get trained up at any time?
Yeah, Kim will do the trainings when she has a group of people that are kind of ready to go.
Gotcha.
Because as we were talking before the podcast, it's like you have to see something a couple of times, maybe 3 to 5 times before you actually act on it. And there are so many of our volunteers that will come to the first class after talking with Kim and say, I've been thinking about doing this for years. And they're finally just, getting around to doing it.
What do you think is the biggest misconception about CASA as an org, or maybe specifically being an advocate?
That's a good question. I think nonprofits in general kind of get a bad rap of what are they actually doing, and if I donate, is the money really going towards the cause? And for us at CASA, it is hard to explain because we have volunteers that advocate for kids in court. We don't have the kids staying in our building. We're not really doing specific things with the kids or for the kids. Yes, we do provide a wealth of services and partnerships and resources. But I feel like that's the hardest concept to kind of get around because we're so oversaturated with nonprofits and people that are asking for money.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I would go to community events and I'm like, oh gosh, here comes Kristin. She's going to ask us for money again. But there's a way that you can ask without asking. I always say, just to get people excited about the cause and want them to be involved. And I cannot tell you how successful a fundraising event can be with just the difference of like 3 people, like 3 people coming, buying a table, bringing their friends, and them spending some money can make or break an event or a fundraiser. So it really doesn't take a whole big wave of community or a ton of people. We always like to say that the quantity of people isn't important. It's the quality that is there for the right reasons.
Well, I feel like CASA is an easy sell.
Well, child abuse is just, it's always so fun to talk about, but
everybody hates it,
Yeah.
So, and when it comes to kids, like we're all just, me included, are suckers for kids that are in trouble. Nobody wants to see that. So, I hope your campaign is successful and people do start reporting more for whatever reason that having dropped off. And I would encourage people to, if you have been one of those people that's been thinking about it for years, it's time to reach out to Kim.
It's time. Yes. It is time because we always have that need, and it is so rewarding. It is so rewarding when knowing what that child has come from to where they can end up and where their whole life trajectory has just changed by the involvement of one person. And wouldn't it just be awesome if you were that person?
Right. I can't really imagine something that would be more rewarding. In fact, I've got little kids of my own right now, but I've told my husband, I think like in the future when life isn't so crazy with all of our children.
Yes.
Like I would love to be, or at least explore being a CASA advocate because
so many of our cases come from generational trauma. Like this is not a situation in which somebody lost their job and can't have a car and then decided to turn to alcohol and started abusing their kids. This is generations. Like parents were treated like this because their parents were treated like this. And we really try to break that cycle because mental health is everybody's so aware now and freely talking about it. And these kids have a chance to really recognize their trauma, to change their patterns, and to stop that cycle of abuse and not turn around and do that to their own kids.
Yeah, I hope. And to get to be a part of that change, that generational change, pretty rewarding.
Pretty rewarding. So maybe people, in 10 or 20 years will say, we don't need CASA anymore, which would be a great place to be.
It would be. It would be, absolutely. Kristin, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to make sure you mention?
I don't think so. Just the being aware. And as a community member, we really are all responsible for our kids because I know it's kind of cliche, but they are our future.
Absolutely. I agree with you. CASA is a wonderful organization. For anybody listening who hasn't heard of it, just go Google them and just read some more and just see where maybe you can be involved, attend an event because they're great. So thanks for all that you do, Kristin.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. For more information, you can go to crecIdaho.com. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again soon.